Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rob, and today we're going to be taking a look at a pretty popular home theater topic right now, and that is whether or not you should invest in upgrading your home theater system to Dolby Atmos. There are a lot of ways to go about this and a lot of different things you should know before making a decision, so if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then stick around. We'll get into it right after the intro. Alright, so as I mentioned, today we're going to be taking a look at whether or not it's worth the time and money to upgrade to Dolby Atmos. Since we did a review of the IOTA AVX17 Atmos processor, which you can find a link to in the description below, we've had a lot of time to experience a full 7.6.4 Atmos setup here in our home theater and see just how much of an improvement there would be. Before we get started, I think I should mention that this video will only be focusing on setups with individual speakers and AV receivers, so we won't be diving into the Atmos soundbar market. Although there are plenty of options out there, today we want to focus on traditional home theater setups, as they offer the most immersive experience possible, and it's what we generally recommend. And if you want to upgrade to Dolby Atmos, you'll need to make sure you have the right equipment. As far as surround sound systems go, you generally have your basic 5.1, 7.1, and 7.2 setups, but as you go up in price, you'll start to see some of the 9.2 or even 11.2 receivers that are capable of running height channels along with your main surround sound speakers. And this is an essential part of putting together an Atmos setup. You need to make sure that you have a receiver or processor and separates that can run all of your speakers. In our opinion, Atmos works best if you can get at least 4 speakers, as this will actually give you 4 different points for the sound to move around in, giving a much more convincing 3D spatial audio effect compared to a 2-channel Atmos system. So, if you have a 5-channel speaker system with 2 subwoofers, you'll want to get at least a 9.2 channel Atmos receiver to run it with 4 height channels. But depending on the size of your room, you might even want to get 6 or more channels to make sure everybody in the room gets the best Atmos experience possible. But that could get pretty expensive, so make sure you keep your budget in mind as well. Now, as far as choosing and setting up your speakers for a Dolby Atmos or DTS:X speaker system, you really only have 3 options for mounting your height channels. The first and most basic way is to use the bounce method. This works by placing up-firing speakers on your main left and right channels, which then bounce signals off your ceiling, and hopefully, if you're positioned in the right spot in the room, you'll be able to hear the Atmos height effects. We usually only recommend going this route if it's your only option. For example, if you're renting and can't mount on-ceiling or in-ceiling speakers, then the up-firing speakers would be the only way to get Atmos in your space. The issue with up-firing speakers is there are a lot of variables that really can affect the quality or amount of sound you'll be getting from this kind of setup. The first and biggest issue would be the height of your ceiling, which will affect the bounce angle of the speakers and in turn the listening position of the room. Another issue is that up-firing speakers will only work with flat ceilings, so if you have vaulted ceilings, I wouldn't recommend them at all because they just won't work properly. A good alternative to the bounce method would be to mount the same speakers on the wall above your main left and right speakers, angled down at the listening position. A good example of a speaker that could be used as either a bounce Atmos speaker or a surface-mounted speaker are the new Emotiva A2 Plus height speakers, mainly because we just did a full review of Emotiva's new 5-channel system, which included the A2s, and we think they're a great choice if you're looking for some really good sounding height speakers. One thing that we really like about the A2s, besides the way they sound, is the very robust mounting system that's included with them. It uses this bracket made from a solid piece of steel that covers the whole back of the speaker, and it gives you 4 well-spaced mounting holes so you can mount the speakers in any of 3 different positions, either on ceiling, on wall vertically, or horizontally. The binding posts are also recessed, so there's plenty of room to use banana plugs or spades while still keeping the speakers flush to the ceiling. The folded ribbon tweeter is also rotatable, so if you decide to mount the A2s to the wall horizontally, the tweeter will have the correct dispersion pattern and the Emotiva logo will also be right side up. I also just want to take a minute to clear something up that I mentioned in our review of the Emotiva 5.0 system. I kind of gave them a hard time for not including magnetic grills with the A2s, but as it turns out, Emotiva actually decided to go with the peg and cup grills because they wanted to be certain that if the speakers were mounted on the ceiling, there would never be any way that the grills could fall off, and this kind of makes sense for me, so I'm okay with that. Now, when it comes to Atmos speakers, there are other options out there, and another very popular one is the SVS Prime elevation speakers that we reviewed here on this channel. And the elevations would be a good choice for height speakers, especially if your main speakers were also SVS. Just be aware that they are rear ported, so if you use the supplied mounting hardware, you only have about a ½ inch of space for the port to breathe, which isn't ideal in my opinion. I also think that the Evotiva mounting system is better designed because it doesn't allow for the speaker to move once it's mounted, unlike the SVS, which does seem to have a small amount of wobble after mounting. Another great thing about surface mounting is you can use any speakers that you have on hand. If you have an old pair of bookshelves, all you need is a mount and you're in business. I've even seen some people mount towers on their ceilings. It's a bit tricky because you have to make sure they're not going to fall off and ruin somebody's day, but it is possible. With that said, some people just don't like the way surface-mounted speakers look cosmetically, and would rather go with an in-ceiling design in order to have a cleaner overall appearance. My first priority when deciding on which height speakers to go with was the sound quality, and the looks pretty much came secondary. But in the end, I went with these OSD black in-ceiling speakers. They have an 8-inch carbon fiber woofer along with a 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter, and they also have a few features that are must-haves to me when considering in-ceiling speakers. The first is the 15-degree angle design of the woofer and tweeter, which makes it a lot more flexible as far as the install goes. It also has a rotatable tweeter so you can dial in the sound to your listening position. This was my first experience with OSD products, so it was kind of roll of the dice whether they would have good sound quality or not. But because these had all the features I was looking for, and they were being sold for $70 a piece, which was over 50% off retail, I decided to take a chance on them. And man, am I glad I did, because these speakers sound amazing, and they blend perfectly with my bed level speakers. I've heard that in-ceiling speakers don't put out as much bass because they're open to the attic, but because these use an open baffle design, they actually put out a lot more bass than I was expecting. OSD claims a frequency response of 35 Hz to 20,000 Hz, but I can't confirm this. And it really doesn't matter because height channel speakers should be crossed over at around 60 to 80 Hz, allowing everything below that to be handled by your subs, which will actually do a much better job at reproducing those lower frequencies. I'm constantly impressed by just how good these speakers sound while watching Dolby Atmos movies. Now with that said, it doesn't matter how good your Atmos speakers are if the movies you're watching don't make good use of them. And what I mean by that is the Atmos soundtracks of some movies are mixed a lot better than others, and some movies barely make use of the channels at all. This is an ongoing debate when it comes to whether or not Atmos is worth adding to your theater. If you have an existing collection of Blu-rays, none of those movies even have Atmos in the first place. So you end up having to spend even more money if you want to upgrade your collection. On the other hand, I found myself actually watching movies again that I normally wouldn't watch, just to experience it again with the Atmos soundtrack. So in conclusion, I think that investing in a Dolby Atmos system can be a huge upgrade to any theater space if you have the time and budget to implement it properly. The quality of the sound you get and how much you'll notice it is all going to depend on your current situation. But in general, I think Atmos brings a lot to the movie watching experience. If you own your own home, then you should definitely consider both surface-mounted and in-ceiling speakers. But if you're renting, your only choices may be to go with on-ceiling or even bounce speakers to get those height effects. And the upgrade might not be as valuable to you right now. Alright guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you want to check out any of the speakers we mentioned here, I'll be sure to leave the links to everything down in the description below. And if you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future content. And as always, have an awesome day.